In the end, it was not a single battle, not a single ship, and not a single general that decided the Second World War. It was an ocean crossed by millions of American soldiers, by endless columns of ships, by fuel, food, steel, and hope. And when that ocean was finally secured, the war was already lost for Nazi Germany. But what few Americans realize is how close that victory came to never happening at all. Because before the Atlantic became America's highway to victory, it was nearly its graveyard. In 1943, the United States was preparing to do what no nation in history had ever done before. Project overwhelming industrial and military power across an entire ocean, sustain it for years, and use it to crush a global enemy. This was the quiet foundation of American victory. Not the beaches of Normandy, not the skies over Germany, but the cold, dark waters of the Atlantic. And for a brief, dangerous moment, that foundation was cracking. If the Atlantic had fallen, Britain would have been cut off, starved, isolated, and without Britain, there would be no staging ground for liberation, no invasion of Europe, no final victory. Every tank, every plane, every soldier depended on ships surviving the crossing. Lose the Atlantic, and the war would be decided before American forces ever set foot on the continent. By early 1943, that outcome no longer seemed impossible. German submarines, U-boats, were sinking Allied ships at a terrifying rate. In March alone, more than 100 Allied vessels vanished beneath the waves. Entire convoys were attacked in the open ocean. Crews went down in freezing water, often without warning, often without survivors. Allied leaders began to speak in quiet, urgent terms, not about setbacks, but about survival. At the center of the storm stood Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz, the architect of Germany's submarine war. Dönitz did not believe Britain needed to be defeated in battle. He believed it could be strangled. His strategy was simple, brutal, and nearly worked. Sink merchant ships faster than they could be replaced, and Britain's war effort would collapse under its own weight. This was the so-called tonnage war, and for years it favored Germany. In 1940, U-boat crews referred to the Atlantic as the happy time. Merchant ships often sailed alone, poorly defended, easy prey in the vastness of the sea. Hundreds were sunk. When the United States entered the war in 1942, the situation became even more favorable for the Germans. American coastal defenses were unprepared. Convoy systems were incomplete. Cities along the US coast remained brightly lit at night, silhouetting passing ships like targets on a firing range. U-boat crews gave this new phase a darker, more confident name: American Shooting Season. Winston Churchill understood the danger better than anyone. He would later admit that the only thing that truly frightened him during the war was the submarine threat. By late 1942, the Atlantic was one of the last theaters where Germany remained decisively on the offensive. In November of that year alone, U-boats sank more Allied shipping than at any other point in the entire conflict. Britain was bleeding tonnage. Every ship lost tightened the noose. Behind closed doors, Allied planners faced a brutal reality. Without control of the Atlantic, there could be no invasion of Europe, no second front, no decisive blow against Germany. At the Casablanca Conference in January 1943, American and British leaders made a hard choice. The invasion of France would be delayed. The Atlantic would take priority. Everything else would wait. Yet, even as the Allies reorganized, the situation worsened. German U-boat numbers had never been higher. From just a few dozen submarines in 1939, the fleet had grown to nearly 300 by early 1943, with more on the way. When Hitler promoted Dönitz to command the entire German Navy, it seemed to confirm Allied fears that the submarine war was about to intensify even further. The most dangerous place of all lay far from land, beyond the reach of most aircraft. Sailors called it the Mid-Atlantic Air Gap. Hundreds of miles of open ocean where convoys had no air cover, where escorts were alone, and where U-boats hunted freely. German intelligence, aided by intercepted Allied communications, could locate the majority of convoys moving through this zone. Wolf packs gathered, attacks followed, losses mounted. In March 1943, the situation reached what many at the time believed was a breaking point. Sinkings surged dramatically compared to the previous month. Allied memoranda spoke openly of crisis. Some feared that the war itself hung in the balance. Yet history, viewed with distance, reveals something more complex. Production in Allied shipyards continued to rise. New vessels were entering service faster than they were being lost. German records themselves did not reflect confidence in imminent victory, and while the surface numbers told one story, something else was happening beneath them. Quietly, relentlessly, the balance of power in the Atlantic was shifting. The turning point was not a miracle weapon or a single battle, but the convergence of many changes at once. Allied intelligence, known as Ultra, began to provide broader awareness of U-boat movements, allowing convoys to be rerouted away from danger. It was imperfect and slow, but it mattered. New radar systems began detecting submarines on the surface at night. Improved sonar could locate them underwater with increasing accuracy. High-frequency direction finding, HFDUF, allowed escorts to track U-boat radio transmissions and move aggressively toward them. For the first time, submarines were no longer invisible. Convoy tactics changed as well. Larger convoys with stronger escort groups proved more efficient and easier to defend. Mobile hunter-killer groups were formed to pursue U-boats rather than merely react to attacks. Most critically of all, the air gap began to close. Long-range aircraft and escort carriers extended Allied reach deep into the Atlantic. U-boats, once kings of the open ocean, found themselves forced underwater for survival and rendered nearly blind. The psychological impact was devastating. German submariners, once confident hunters, now endured relentless pursuit. Depth charges thundered through the water. Sonar pings echoed endlessly in the dark. Survivors spoke of fear, exhaustion, and confusion. Experience declined rapidly as veteran crews were lost and replaced by men with only months of training. The collapse came in May 1943. That month, convoy SC-130 crossed the Atlantic under heavy German attention. Dozens of U-boats converged, expecting another victory. Instead, they were met by disciplined escorts, coordinated tactics, and overwhelming pressure from sea and air. The hunters were driven off. Several submarines were destroyed. None of the merchant ships were lost. Among the dead was Dönitz's own son. By the end of May, German losses were catastrophic. 41 U-boats were gone, nearly a quarter of the operational fleet. For the first time, the submarine war was unsustainable. Dönitz ordered his forces withdrawn from the Atlantic. The decision was not temporary in its consequences. The U-boats would never again pose a serious strategic threat. The ocean had changed sides. What followed was inevitable. The Atlantic became an Allied highway. Millions of American soldiers crossed safely. Equipment poured into Britain. The invasion of Europe became possible, then unstoppable. 2 years later, American and Allied forces stood in the ruins of Berlin. The war was over. The Battle of the Atlantic was not won with a single victory, but with adaptation, coordination, and industrial power on a scale the world had never seen. For a moment, defeat was close enough to touch, and then it was pushed back, not by chance, but by design. This was the moment when history stood minutes from defeat and turned away